If you look closely at a shadow on the wall of your room, you will notice that its edge is never truly sharp. Light bleeds around the corner of an object, softening the transition from brightness to darkness in a way that your brain understands instantly without ever having to think about it. For millions of years, this subtle behavior of photons has been a simple, unowned fact of existence. It belonged to no one because it was merely how the universe organized itself. Lately, however, that quiet consensus has begun to shift. In windowless office parks across California, Washington, and Europe, patent attorneys are spending long hours writing extraordinarily precise descriptions of light, sound, and depth. They are drafting claims not on microchips or glass lenses, but on the geometry of presence itself. They are attempting to secure exclusive legal ownership over the mathematical models that dictate how light should bounce off a surface that does not exist. When we talk about spatial computing, we often default to thinking about hardware. We imagine sleek glass visors, tiny cameras, and custom silicon processors strapped to a human face. But hardware is merely the physical shell for something far more ambitious. The real prize, the quiet conflict happening behind thousands of pending regulatory filings, is the privatization of perceptual physics. To make a digital object appear as though it is sitting on your kitchen table, a computer must solve a series of profound equations in real time. It must calculate how the ambient light in your actual room would reflect off a hypothetical material. It must determine how that object should be occluded when you pass your hand in front of it. It must simulate the micro-delay of sound waves reaching your left ear a fraction of a millisecond before your right ear, convincing your brain that a sound originated 3 feet to your left. These are not merely graphic tricks. They are simulations of fundamental physical law. And because they are required for spatial computing to feel real, the companies building these systems are trying to patent every conceivable way to calculate them. Consider the problem of light field rendering. If you want a digital sphere to look real, you cannot simply project an image into a pair of eyes. You have to mimic the exact direction, intensity, and phase of thousands of individual rays of light as they pass through space. To do this efficiently requires unique mathematical shortcuts. Whoever owns the most elegant shortcut effectively owns the right to render compelling light in the space around you. The filings themselves read like a strange, modern ledger of natural phenomena. There are patents for the exact algorithm that calculates how a shadow's edge should blur as an object moves away from a surface. There are patents for methods of measuring the subtle, involuntary microsaccades of your pupil to predict where your attention will drift next. There are claims covering the precise mathematical formulas used to simulate the resonant reverberation of a carpeted room versus a concrete hallway. It is a slow, quiet, and largely invisible land grab. In the era of desktop computing, companies fought over screen real estate and operating systems. In the mobile era, they fought over app stores and location data. Now, the battleground has expanded to fill the physical volume of our living rooms, offices, and streets. There is something strangely surreal about reading these documents. They take concepts that have belonged to the domain of theoretical optics and human physiology for centuries and convert them into corporate assets. A method for calculating depth perception becomes intellectual property. A formula for spatial audio reflection becomes a trade secret. For a long time, the public narrative around this technology focused on convenience and immersion. We were told that spatial computing would free us from the flat rectangles in our pockets, allowing digital information to blend seamlessly into our physical environments. What was rarely discussed was the underlying mechanics required to pull off that illusion. To blend digital information into the physical world, the machine must first ingest the physical world completely. It must scan the contours of your couch, map the reflective indices of your windows, and record the unique acoustic signatures of your home. It must translate reality into a structural mesh that can be analyzed and overwritten. And here is where a subtle, unsettling realization begins to take shape. To grant a company the patent on the physics of spatial computing is not just to give them ownership over software. It is to give them control over the interface between human perception and external reality. When you look through a screen at a digital object, you are looking at a display. But when spatial computing functions as intended, you are no longer looking at a display. You are looking through a mediated lens where every photon, every sound wave, and every depth Q has been calculated by a proprietary algorithm. If one company holds the master patent on how digital light interacts with real-world shadows, and another holds the patent on how digital sound bounces off real-world walls, then human perception itself becomes a licensed ecosystem. The subtle cues that your brain uses to determine what is real and what is not are no longer governed solely by nature. They are governed by code, subject to royalty agreements, cross-licensing deals, and corporate litigation. If a competitor attempts to render a digital object in your room using a slightly different calculation of light refraction, they may face a cease and desist letter. The result is a future where the fidelity of your sensory experience depends entirely on which corporate entity holds the legal rights to the underlying physics. A cheaper device might render light unnaturally, not because the technology is incapable, but because the natural mathematical formula is legally restricted by a competitor. We are quietly transitioning from an era where technology lived inside devices to an era where technology forms the medium through which we observe space. In doing so, we are allowing the baseline rules of spatial awareness to be carved up into claims and dependent clauses. If you sit quietly in a room right now and look around, the world appears reassuringly solid and unmediated. The dust motes floating through a beam of sunlight do so according to the unbending, unowned laws of thermodynamics. The echo of your footsteps against the floorboards is governed by simple acoustics. No one owns the relationship between your eyes and the light bouncing off the table in front of you. It feels permanent, feels neutral. Yet, every day, thousands of pages of technical specifications are submitted to government patent offices around the world, slowly enclosing the mechanics of how that experience can be duplicated, augmented, and replaced. They are setting up legal tollbooths along the pathways of human perception, waiting for the day when the space between your eyes and the room around you is no longer empty, but filled with calculated light. When the world around you is finally fully mediated, and every beam of light you see is rendered by a system that owns the rights to its physics, how will you know where nature ends and someone else's property begins?